Oh, thanks, Sonia. Good morning, everyone. I'm Brian Smith, Chair of the TCHC's Board's Governance, Communication, and Human Resources Committee. Welcome to the public session of today's committee meeting in the light of the need for social distancing to limit the spread of COVID-19. We're holding this committee meeting virtually. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the land claims, and let me begin by acknowledging the land claims each of us is on as we hold this virtual meeting is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississauga of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. And there's now the many diverse First Nations, Inuit, Métis peoples. And we also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. During this public session today, there are several reports for information, including the standing report on City Council directions requiring board attention, the process of establishing a roster of firms to provide support in executive recruitments, and the process that will govern the corporation of TCHC to other social housing providers. There is also one report for the committee's approval and comment regarding the adoption of rules of procedure governing the board and committee meetings. As we always invite deputations from our stakeholders, our tenants, and other public, we have not received at this point any deputations with regards to either virtually or through a written presentation. So and I just want to confirm with you, Sonia, that we have not received any further requests for deputations.
That's correct.
Yes, thank you. Now, approval of agenda and review of other agenda items. I will now receive public consent of the agenda items and public regular agenda items as they're listed, and there are any items that anyone wants to hold. I don't see any, so
I don't want to get caught off on Brian. I don't want to get caught off guard on the business arising. So, like I did in camera. So, I want to make sure that we can have a look at that together, please. Thank you.
Sure. So we'll hold item 3.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we have a motion to approve the agenda and the order of the agenda and hold item number 3.
Sorry, are we approving item 4, 5, and 6? No.
No. The motion that I'll put up shortly is just to approve the matters on the consent agenda.
Thank you. Okay.
Yes.
Thanks, Tara.
No.
So I have a motion on that. I'm looking for people on my screen.
I'm fine.
Marcel?
I'll move that. I'll move it.
And seconded by Paula. Okay. Declaration of conflict of interest. Would members of the Governance, Communications, and Human Resource Committee please indicate any agenda item which they may have a conflict of interest, together with the nature of that conflict, if any. Not hearing any response, no conflicts of interest were declared for any agenda item. Can I please have a motion to approve the public consent agenda?
I can approve.
Thanks, Uba, and seconded by Marcel. Thank you. All those in favor, motion carried. Item 3 is business arising from the public minutes and action items, which is put forward to the committee for information. Is there anyone that would like to discuss any of those items? I do believe, Paula, you wanted to hold, and I can't remember what the item was, but.
Yeah, it's that one. I'm just having trouble getting it to it on my iPad. Thank you. Just looking at it, reviewing it. The vendors is being worked on. HR data. We've got our work plan scope today that's on the agenda. And the discussion on the development model, is that on the agenda today? No. So I just have a word on that.
On which one, Paula?
7. It's action item number 7, development funding model. I think there's 2 different things here. One is to establish the development funding model that TCHC uses. The second part is how it will be impacted. But I think it's critical for us to have a really clear understanding of the first part. So if we put these in 2 sections, you can see. And it says it'll come back after pending further information from the city. I think we need to divide these out, and I don't know, I'm sorry, Kelly, I don't see the original motion, but I'm wondering today, Brian, if we can discreetly pull them apart, because it should be fairly simple to present the development funding model.
Okay.
So we have that clear, and then the impacts can be looked at as we proceed with the city and create TO. But number 1 is to really understand that. So can I just ask Kelly, and I can't see her on the screen now because I've got this other piece here. There you are. Could we not have that discrete piece of work done pretty quickly?
We could certainly have that done pretty quickly, yes.
Was that information been provided? That information's been provided, I think, to the city already, maybe. But I think the board needs to have a very clear understanding of revenues, spending, the unit, what gets covered, everything. And I think perhaps even by the board meeting that could be done. The impact is a longer discussion, but that's base information.
We can pull together an overview report on how development projects are funded, yes. Separate from the transfer.
Yeah, I think in order for the board to have a good discussion and all the boards to have clear discussions, having base information is pretty critical and the board needs to have it. So that would be great. Well, if we can have that, then we'll know if we've got everything we need. Thank you so much for that.
So is that bringing it back to the next board meeting?
Yeah, I don't want to wait for all the impacts. I want that. So if Kelly can have that prepared somehow, it's supposed to go to BiFAC and
So,
go to BiFAC, but I think
Yeah.
it should just get somehow out there.
so Kelly, see if I can offer, does it make sense to bring that back to the next BiFAC meeting rather than to the board directly on the 7th of October? Because the deadline for the reports for the board meeting is next Tuesday, and I'm just concerned that that may not give staff enough time to actually put that document together. But if we brought it to the next BiFAC meeting, it probably could be dealt with that way.
We can certainly make the deadlines for the next BiFAC meeting.
Yes.
Is that
that's-
acceptable?
When is that meeting, Dara? You just said, do you know?
I will in a minute.
perfect. Of course you will. Thank you.
It is, sorry. The next BiFAC meeting is on November 4th.
That's a long ways away.
It's possible that we could distribute the material offline prior to that date, but present it at so that members of the committee might have it prior to the date of the meeting. And we might be able to, we could also arrange for a broader distribution of that and then table it at the November 4th meeting if that works.
That might work. I'm just to be clear because that's great. But was the funding model tied to the impact, or did we ask to have the funding model?
I believe we combined that. We understood the two action items to be related as one. So I understand, and
They
so
never were.
we can absolutely report them back separately with the impact being deferred based until we get the additional information.
So rather than, could we just get a briefing note on that to each,
yes,
the committee, clearly outlining that? I think that would be helpful because it just needs to be there.
Understood.
So anticipated time for that might be for a briefing note. Maybe Kelly could advise if it was a briefing note rather than a full report.
If you could give us about a week and a half to pull that together, we just want to align with finance.
Sure, that's perfect. Okay, thank you. And in light of other discussions, that would also be helpful to understand in light of other things happening. So thanks very much, 10 days. That's great. Thanks, Kelly.
So can I please have a motion to receive the...
No, I'm going to move that. I'm going to move the briefing note.
Okay, I was going to add that to the motion.
Okay, you go ahead then, Brian. Thank you.
A motion to receive the action items with the inclusion of a briefing note to the committee on item 7. I think it is item 7.
That's correct.
Is that correct there?
Yes.
Both committees, I think, to BiFAC and
sure.
GC. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, moved by Paula, seconded by Marcel. Thank you. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Uba, yes?
Yeah.
Thank you. Item number 4, board and committee meeting rules of procedure. That was circulated to the committee. Dara, do you want to speak to that?
Yes. So the last time this report was before committee, we had direction to develop a draft set of rules of procedure, and I'm going to stress draft set of rules of procedure that achieved the overarching principles that were identified in the rules that have been adopted by another city-related organization, the Toronto Parking Authority, with the assistance of city staff, because the direction that TCHC has received from the city and its shareholder direction is to develop rules of procedure, which will be the subject of a bylaw number 4 for TCHC and will require council approval. So recognizing that these overarching principles are going to be what inform the TPA's rules, our approach was that we should ensure that we are referencing those same principles in developing the rules from TCHC in order to ensure that they'll be acceptable to the city. So the principles that we've identified, which are in the report, are that the majority of directors have the right to decide on issues. A minority of directors have the right to be heard on issues where they don't necessarily agree with the majority. All directors have the right to information to help make decisions unless otherwise prevented by law. That directors have the right to an efficient meeting and the right to be heard with respect and courtesy, and that all directors have equal rights, privileges, and obligations. With those principles in mind, we have provided the committee with a draft of rules of procedure based on informal procedural guidelines that TCHC staff had previously developed but not had approved at the board level in relation to the manner in which the meetings were conducted, supplemented with some additional provisions to address definitions of terms that are used in the document to make it easier to reference and somewhat clearer in terms of some of the phrases that are used. We've incorporated the overarching principles that were identified in the TPA rules in section 2 of the proposed rules as the guiding principles that would inform the interpretation of these rules, and we've provided that in the event of a conflict between the rules, or if there is some element of the rules where we haven't addressed the matter fully, that the board would reference the municipal codes, chapter 27. This is the City of Toronto Municipal Code, in which the city establishes its rules of procedure for council. The rules address matters including the scheduling of board meetings, conducting virtual meetings, the process through which special meetings are called or meetings are canceled, potential for board workshops, what is quorum, the role of the chair, and a number of rules that relate to the process of having motions considered, amended, and adopted by the board and its committees. It also addresses our deputation process, which is a matter of interest, I know, to the board and to members of the public who monitor the board's processes. I would want to highlight one aspect of what we are proposing as far as our deputation process is concerned, and that is that we have proposed that for matters that appear on the committee agenda before they proceed to the board, that deputations should be considered at the committee level. And the reason that we've made that recommendation is that the purpose of the deputation is to inform board members of the views of individuals outside of TCHC management in relation to the matters considered by the board and its committees, so that the board members can consider those perspectives in developing its approach to an issue. Where those deputations are received only at the board level, it limits the ability of the board to consider those perspectives in fashioning that approach. Whereas if the deputations are heard at the committee level, both the board and staff have the ability to consider that perspective between the time that the matter is considered at the committee and the time that it's considered by the board, and take a more thoughtful approach to the issue. So what we have proposed is that for matters that are considered at committee and then proceed to the board, deputations, verbal in-person deputations, should be considered at the committee level. Written submissions on an issue could be considered at either level where the matter is being considered. So if an individual feels that they've had a view they wanted to express on an issue that has already been considered at committee, they're not deprived of the opportunity to express their view, but the avenue, the methods through which they can express their perspective on the matter is through a written submission to the board that is then distributed to board members in advance of the meeting. What that does is allows for a release valve, if you will, for folks who miss a committee meeting and still have a view they want to express. So that's a highlight of the rules. As I've said, they're draft. They're here because it's the first time that the committee is going to be seeing them for your comment. And so that we can receive your perspective on whether or not they serve the purpose for which they're prepared.
Any questions, Paula?
I just have a comment first and then another comment. I think we should understand the parking authority rules were developed because of issues dealing with board governance and an investigation by the Auditor General into the workings of the parking authority. So to just look somehow that the parking authority is getting an upgrade or here's how the board should operate, it was an Auditor General investigation in which the CEO and another person were fired outright, where the board came into being much closer alignment with the city. It had to do with procurement. It's a public document. And the fact that the board chair and others weren't clear enough with staff when the board was asking for information. So I find that somehow we're not getting to the nub of it, that a director asked for information and was snubbed by the board and snubbed by the corporation regarding an evaluation. So these changes, I think we look at from the point of increasing board governance and the ability to get the information that's required to do the job. So Dara, you've read that report. Let me know if I've said anything that's incorrect, will you please?
I'm familiar with the report. I believe that accurately describes some of the history that informed that document. I would say that the document that we've presented to the committee today is actually fairly different from the TPA rules, but I understand.
I'm looking at where it came from, and that the models of good governance that the former ombudsman sent the Tories LLP report on board governance that was done at the request of the city. Tories did a report on board governance at TPA and made recommendations about strengthening board governance. And that was considered and is considered a seminal document by the shareholder and by the ombudsman. So we had that at the same time as we were looking at the RT report. So all of these things I would say would just be making some changes, but the deputation policy, have you had this discussion with the chair yet, Dara, on this? Did you speak with the chair? Not this chair, Brian, but the board chair.
Well, the approach that we took was to prepare a draft document for consideration by this committee.
So you've not had a discussion with the chair about this draft?
We have not
at this point. It's just been with myself and.
Okay. So I just have to say this about the deputation policy, that number one, how we could not ask tenants what they thought about deputing and when and how, and because who comes to depute generally are tenants. When there's an issue, we hear. They're not paid, they're not staff, they're not following everything every day. And so, and I'd like to hear from our tenant appointed board members who are appointed on behalf of the city to think about tenant issues, about the impact of what if you miss it? What if you what if something comes up? What if something comes up between the board meeting could be a big media issue between the board meeting, the committee meeting and the board meeting. So I am really unhappy about this because we've never had this conversation so clearly before around the options, and we've been grappling with it since the very inception. TCHC has allowed tenants in particular to speak to the board. So we would be cutting off the ability of tenants to speak directly to the board with this policy, as I understand it.
Well, I guess our concern, Paula, is that we want to have more conversation. And one of the challenges we have at board meetings is that we, in my view, give lip service to some of the input from the various stakeholders, especially tenants. and we really can't get into a discussion, whereas hopefully there could be more engagement and involvement if there was that discussion at the committee meeting, where it could be better informed and make changes to any thing that's brought forward to the board, and of course still provide opportunity for deputants to either agree or disagree with what's being brought forward by putting forward a written
I get it.
piece
I hear you. Yeah.
So really, I think we're trying to figure out a way to actually engage in a better discussion, because I from my perspective, it hasn't been very satisfactory having a lot of people making deputations at the board meeting without really having the time to enter into a discussion about that issue. Now, granted, if there are other items that are not coming directly to the board, there's a way, you know, those deputations could continue, but where there has been opportunities to put forward something through a committee, hopefully we could find ways to make sure that especially tenants would have input, and their input could inform and help shape whatever comes to the board.
Well, sometime, sorry, I'd like to hear how we're going to ask tenants how they'd like to make.
So one of the suggestions I would have is that we ask the Tenant Services
I'm asking
Committee.
Uba, and I'm asking Marcel.
Okay.
Well,
how we can do that.
well, I kind of see both sides. I think both sides have some merit. However, I do remember, I don't know if I remember correctly, but wasn't there supposed to be something down the road where some of the board would be meeting with the tenants of TCHC and like discussing any kind of concerns or anything that they might have?
I believe on an informal basis, we were looking for ways, difficult as it is under the COVID, but where we could have board members and tenants meet in their specifically probably regions, so that we could have a better dialogue with tenants. But that wouldn't be in a formal way, as of course our meetings are of a formal nature. So yes, I agree. We need better discussions and dialogue with tenants. We're a little bit restricted under our need to be virtual, but yes, yes, that's true, Marcel. But in terms of formal
Those
input,
aren't on the record conversations, though, Marcel.
Yeah,
they're not on the record, right? They're not in the minutes on the record that clearly as board meetings are. We haven't looked at taking deputations down to 3 minutes with an option to increase another 2. The board can say, we'll give you another 2 minutes, but decreasing the deputations. I'm going to say that the chair has to make sure that a deputant is on topic. You're there to talk about a topic, not to talk about the world. We're very poor at managing deputations at this board, but I hear a lot of deputations that I sit through. And every once in a while, there's that gem, that really important thing that comes from having those voices. And I'm not personally willing to give that up. So not on. I'll go the distance on this one.
Well, I guess I wonder whether we could, I'm not sure we're looking to receive this, and ask for comments from Tenant Services Committee for their input on this.
Yeah, okay, yes, that's fine. Send it over to Tenant Services. And then we have tenants that make deputations. Go back over the last 2 years, find the tenants who make deputations, and they can be part of the solution. We get a lot of interesting information sometimes. You know, somebody said, why, when you come to my unit, don't I have a checklist that I can let management know if those things were actually done? when somebody's working in your unit. Well, that made a lot of sense. And then Sheila has started to institute that. So there's some good ideas out there. Okay. Tenant services, good
It's
plan.
finding the best way to bring those forward.
Well, considering that people don't have a lot of access all the time, they have limited access, and I really feel strongly about cutting it off. We need to manage it.
It's trying to find the way. So let's have some input from the Tenant Services Committee and ask them for their feedback. Should this then go to the board or come back to us at our next meeting with their feedback?
My recommendation, Mr. Chair, is that if the matter is going to be referred to the Tenant Services Committee for its consideration, that once we've heard from that committee, that it should come back here. My sense is that this committee will want another review of the document before it's presented to the board as a final document. And I do want to stress this is a draft. We've given it to the committee as a means to start a conversation about what these rules should look like. We've tried to address the concerns about an effective board meeting and an effective opportunity for tenants to depute to the board in the document. But by all means, we're happy to have input from folks who are interested in this document to make sure that we get it right.
So the motion should be to receive the proposed rules for procedure and forward it to the Tenant Services Committee for their comment to be brought back to our next meeting.
Agreed.
So,
I will note, Chair, that we're talking about the Deputation Policy, that we have no deputants. For some reason, people don't know. But I'm sure between now and the board, people would know, and then they would want to depute to the board. Sometimes that's just how tenants know things. And I am loath with a whole Tenants First program, the amount of time we're spending making a better life for tenants, that we'd somehow snuff out that one availability where everybody can hear what they have to say.
but
But nobody's deputing today, so we know this doesn't work at committee.
Yeah. Well, we're not excluding that as part of the process, but let's hear back from Tenant Services, and then people will be able to depute after we've refined it and made whatever changes are suggested and agreed upon. So it's not saying that we don't want the general deputant population to make deputations on this, but let's refine it so that when they do, we're more comfortable than we presently are with the document.
No, I am fully in agreement with that. I'm just noting for the record that
Sure.
we're talking about deputations. It's a big issue and there's no deputants. So my point about having to follow every committee and every comma and every T and every dotted I, that is not what tenants do.
No, I agree. Well, what we're looking for ways to engage them better.
Well, some people want to be engaged in speaking to the Board of Government.
I realize that. I just find that sometimes we short shift people because we can't spend the time that's required to ask questions and go into detail because of the demands of all the other items on the agenda. We can't have meetings that are, 5 hours long. So I just don't feel that sometimes we respect the people that are making the deputations because of giving them short shift. So all I'm trying to do is find the best ways to engage. So let's circulate this to the Tenant Service Committee, ask them for their comments and suggestions, and bring it back to our next meeting, and then we can decide where we go from there.
I think Mr. Charlebois had a comment.
Oh, sorry, I can't see you, Marcel.
Okay, thank you. Is it is it worthwhile to maybe even try and get the tenant reps to be involved a little bit in this?
I mean, I'm not sure what the process is for that, but certainly, yes.
Because they would kind of know like exactly what's going on in their communities, and they might be able to get better feedback from the tenants, right? For this, it's just a thought.
We're
So
happy
would that
to.
be, go ahead, Sarah.
We're happy to consider any options in terms of how we get input from folks who the committee feels should inform this document. We keep in mind that one of the interests that we're trying to ensure is that for board members that the meetings are run efficiently and that you have the information that you require and an opportunity to engage in a discussion with other members of the board on those issues. We can consider distributing or inviting tenant reps to comment on the document. We can consider posting the document in draft form. We've already posted it on the website. We can make that more prominent so that folks looking at our website have the opportunity to know that it's there and that they have an opportunity to comment on it that way. We'll bring it absolutely forward to the Tenant Services Committee, where I think our experience says we more than likely, if folks are going to depute at any of our committees, they most frequently depute at Tenant Services. So there are different avenues through which we can get input on this document before we finalize it for the board's consideration.
Well, can you please be in touch with all the deputants to let them know this item will be on the Tenant Services Committee agenda, whenever it's going to be on that agenda. That would be my motion.
What I think you asked previously was deputants who'd been before the board in the last 2 years. Absolutely.
Since the latest 2018, since this board was formed. Yeah. And I would just say again that if you go back and review, you'll see that there's not very good management around the deputations, that you're there to talk about X, then talk about that. So there's many different ways to do this, and we'll talk about that at Tenant Services. Thanks.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
do you have that motion in a form that's understood, Dara?
I'm going to take the last piece as instructions to staff, and we'll report back at
Okay.
the Tenant Services Committee when we bring this matter forward on the measures that we took to contact previous deputants, so that the committee will understand that process.
And that includes the
So-
seniors as well.
Of
That
course,
includes the staff and others that generally come. Because
absolutely.
thank you. Thanks, Dara. That's
So-
great.
So if I understand the motion, is to receive the report, to forward it to the Tenant Services Committee for their comments to bring back and on our next agenda.
Yes. Once the Tenant
So-
Services Committee has had an opportunity to provide comment, we'll bring it back to this committee.
Yes. So Paula, were you moving that motion?
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you. Seconder,
Uba.
thanks, Uba. Thank you. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And just looking at our next agenda item. Process for establishing roster and executive search firms. Item number 5 is the annual update on subsidiaries report, which is put forward for the committee's information. Barbara, if you have any other comments?
Thank you, Chair. No, the request by the committee was to provide an update, to provide a report on the process that would need to be undertaken to create a roster. And this report highlights that the creation of a roster would fall under the established procurement protocols. And it just provides a high-level overview of the steps that would be taken to issue the request for proposals, and high-level overview of the key criteria that we would be looking for in potential vendors. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions, Paula?
We did establish a roster with the CEO recruitment that you led, Brian, did we not, through an RFP process? Could that not be in place until we would update that?
Yeah, yes, but I guess it depends on the focus of the item that needs to have input on, because if I remember correctly from I mean, obviously we were doing search in that case, so we had a case, but depends on what the focus is, whether the type of organization or input firm that you would be recruiting, if I understand that correctly from your comments, Barbara.
So it's executive search firm.
So if I can comment.
Yeah, we did have a group there, but that was for that specific area. Dara?
I was just going to add the process that the board undertook in relation to the search ultimately resulting in Mr. Sharma's appointment. It was specific. Firstly, it was a board-run process, and so the process through which TCHC management would establish a roster of executive search firms that may be available to assist in recruitment matters would be at the management level rather than the board level. So in some conversations that we've had with procurement, I think that there is a challenge in terms of simply using the process that was previously undertaken by the board as a mechanism to retain executive search firms to assist management in recruitment matters, just from a process perspective. That procurement process was actually specific to that one appointment. And so we invited firms to participate in that process, and they did, and a firm was selected to assist us in that process. But the process of establishing a roster of firms differs in substance. It's a different type of assignment, and I think we would likely need to, I think the advice from procurement is that if we were going to pursue that roster, we'd need to start a new process.
Can I just say that we had the roster that we established basically is a C-suite roster. There's C-suite rosters, and then there's other management rosters. So CEO, COO, CFO. That was, I think, I'd like to see how we can make sure that we have a roster, because we didn't have one. We had to go out and do that. And then what the experience was in different circumstances previously, be able to have some of that feedback into it. So perhaps from the board point of view, Dara, and I take your point very seriously, the board needs to make sure there is a robust C-suite roster that we would say yes. The rest of that isn't the board's business, but I believe the C-suite is the board's business.
Sorry, just a reminder for anybody joining, if you can mute.
Uva.
No,
I think it's me. I got kicked out.
Sorry, I apologize for this.
Got a good beat going there, Brian. It's good.
I don't know.
Okay, he's going now.
Yeah, I've lost the video, so.
We still have you though.
Yeah, I'm on my cell phone, but
And so I think what I understand, Councillor, I think I understand the concern that you're expressing to be that in any process that we undertake of this nature, we need to engage the board.
I would say for the C-suite,
Yeah, understood.
that I think the board would like to make sure there's a robust roster that we've said, yes, great reputations, great service previously, no skeletons, no closet skeletons, because there are a couple of doors when you open them that you get knocked down with some skeletons, and have as clean as a whistle C-suite recruitment that we feel comfortable for JAG take forward for anything. And then obviously there are firms that, for your VPs here and there, that's really not the board's business, but I do think it is our business on the C-suite. Ensuring a standard. Is that okay, Dara?
So I think from a process perspective, I think the approach that the organization has taken in the past is that the decisions, hiring decisions at the VP level are made by the president and CEO, but recognizing that folks at a certain level who will interact and need the confidence of the board in order to be appointed as officers, that the board has a role to play there. And I'm sure that we can create a process. I'm looking at JAG and at Barbara as I'm saying this. I'm sure we can create a process that reflects that interest.
And that we do have a rigorous process that we went through.
Yes.
Del, Brian, and Paula for months actually to get that RFP properly done. And it was well executed, well documented. As we know, the previous recruitments, there was no documentation of any kind through the board. There was no minutes. This has been an exemplary process, and Brian, you're not on the screen, but led by you. So I'd just like to make sure that that standard of practice that we reached through this time is going to be the standard from here on in for the C-suites. So the board sets a standard, then it's good for the corporation easily can follow that. Thanks.
Understood.
So what is there a follow-up to do on that, Dara?
I think the report that is before the committee this morning is a report for information. The process through which we act on implementing that mechanism is I defer to Barbara and JAG as to how we bring that back, if there's a need to bring that back. But certainly I think the takeaway, and again, I think it's instructions to staff, is to ensure that in any process that's undertaken in this regard, we create a mechanism for the board to provide input as to, one, the process, and two, the selection process, to ensure that it's well documented and professional.
Could we just leave this with our new CEO, please, around C-suite recruitment, working with Barbara, and a roster that we currently have? Can that double up if we need to? Who should or shouldn't, you know, how do we have input? Who should or shouldn't be on that list for whatever reason, given previous recruitments, etc. Given that we've gone through a 2.5-year HR investigation, I think this is part of that overall, just raising the standard. So that would, I see our CEO is nodding his head, so he's seized. Could you comment, please, JAG?
Absolutely, through you, Chair. To Councillor Fletcher, certainly I'd be happy to be not only participating but helping to lead that, and I'll work with the team to that end. And I think I've captured the fact that we want to focus on C-suite, and we want to make sure that we have that appropriate roster available. So I'll work with Ms. Schulman and Mr. Meager to ensure that that's the case.
And that certainly can be informed by the work we did in our previous work on the Succession Planning Committee.
Great.
So can I have a motion to receive the report regarding the process for establishing the roster of executive search firms that can be relied on as required for recruitment of executive staff for the committee's information? I can't see anybody because I'm not on screen, so please, I don't know.
I know the other.
Speak up, I can't. at this point, I can't see anybody. So.
I think you've captured that, Brian. The other thing that we wanted to capture was advice from the board on when sometimes many things were being done internally. I think we changed that, Dara. We found that in the HR report, that there was just a lot of internal hirings, and that for key executive positions, that it always be a larger pool. Could you comment where that one's at? I just wanted Jag to understand that too.
That may be a matter that we need to take away, but yeah, I understand that the concern is that in any recruitment process that we undertake at a certain level, that we're looking to check against not only our own internal folks who might be applicants for the role, but the environment generally in the world as to other folks who might be available to us.
Yeah, thank you.
So is that satisfactory for the motion, Dara?
I believe so.
Okay. So Paula, will you move that, and Uba or Miriam, can you somebody second it since I can't see anybody? So moved by Paula, seconded by Uba. All those in favor?
Favor.
Favor.
Motion's carried. So now can I please have the next item, item 6, is that?
It is. It's the overview report, the comparison of TCHC to other social housing providers. And I think Lindsay Vietz is on the call to speak to that item. Or is John, are you speaking to that?
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, it's John here. I can walk the committee through the report, and also Lindsay's online, so if there's any questions, we'd be happy to take it. But the report that's in front of the committee this morning is in response to the request made at the last meeting to outline a plan that management intends to implement to address the previous request for TCHC to be compared to other social housing providers. Through the work plan, the intent is to ultimately have a document that will be provided to management and eventually to this committee that outlines TCHC's service model, staffing costs, and staffing levels, and compare with other social housing providers against those same dimensions. And with that, I'll be happy to take any questions or comments from any committee members in regards to the plan and the report.
I would like this to go to the board. Is this going to the board, John, this report?
I don't believe so. Derek, can you confirm?
The report as it presently exists is a report to this committee for its information, which wouldn't, at this level, would not yet go to the board.
Yeah, so I'm going to forward this. My motion is to send this to the board so they can comment. There's only 3 of us here, 4. And it really has to do with ensuring perhaps that the matrix that you're going to be looking at, management to staff, all those kinds of things that shouldn't be that hard to select a number of different housing providers. So I think you need some good advice here, so you don't do a bunch of work and then find that it wasn't the right work, because there's nothing more frustrating for staff than spending a lot of time on something and then finding, oh, oops, that wasn't exactly what was expected. So let's be really clear on the metrics that we're looking at and the actual what we're trying to get out of this. And I think it'd be helpful to have this at the board with that question. If you can boil that down a little bit so that we're giving you clear direction based on what your initial this draft report is, that would be, I think, worthwhile for everybody, John.
Okay, understood. Thanks, Councillor.
Thank you. Didn't want to leave you out, Lindsay.
Any other comments or questions? Hearing none.
So, Mr. Chair, Sorry,
So,
Mr. Chair.
yes.
I've just shared on screen. I don't think I think you're calling in
Yeah.
now, so you may not be able to see it. I've amended
Okay.
the recommendation in the report for the purposes of a motion that would provide that the committee would receive for its information this report and forward it to the board for its consideration.
Yes. Can I have a person to move that motion? I can't see anybody.
You can't see me. I'm moving it. It's Paula moving.
Thanks, Paula. And the seconder?
I'll second it.
Thanks, Tim. All those in favor?
In favor.
Good. Motion's carried. What do we have next?
So the next matter on the agenda, Mr. Chair, would be to inquire if there's any new business, other business that committee members want to add to the agenda.
Yes. Okay. Does any committee member have any other items that they want for discussion? And hearing none, look for a motion to terminate the public meeting.
Motion to terminate.
Great. Thanks, Paula. Seconder?
Second.
Thanks, Tim. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Sorry about the technical difficulties today, but anyways, appreciate everybody's involvement and thank you very much.
Thanks, Brian. That was difficult to chair with so many things going on virtually, so you did a good job.
Yeah.